curiosity has this amazing ability to connect to people. Doesn't matter what age you are, doesn't matter what you come from. Being curious, if it's genuine, it will blow people's mind every time.
How did you take these skills of curiosity, connecting with other people, being someone of high emotional intelligence, speaking different languages, and turn it into something that made you want to wake up every morning and create as a job?
It was July of 2015. We had 40,000 subscribers, and before the next year, we had 200,000 subscribers. And I had gotten full-time job offers, and I turned them down.
You start sharing your journals online. When did you know that it was going to turn into a business?
I have the list of things I love. When you're trying to juggle many things, nothing gets done well.
How did you then grow it into what it is now, from 7 members to hundreds of members?
Money doesn't change you, it just shows you who you've always been.
Welcome to the making of Jo. Franco, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much, Alexis. It feels like we are dear friends. I'm a big fan of Circle. You don't even need to ask me on the podcast, and I'll say it's changed my business. It really did. So thank you.
I love hearing that, and we will get into the weeds on that. But I want to actually start here at the inception of Jo. I want to know what you were like as a child. What were you into? Describe yourself.
I should have my sister come on board. She actually works for JoClub, and she saw the whole thing, but she always tells everybody in JoClub, like, Jo was such an emotional kid. Mm-hmm. And it's so funny to have your big sister say that, because if she says it, you know it's true. Like, I had this heart that filled with the emotions of the world. Like, it genuinely felt like I was sad for the whole wide world. And my mom didn't even know what to do with me, to the point where she tried religion. She tried like this and that and like different kinds of theology. And it ended up that she gave me these crystals. She made me pick 5 crystals in this big crystal store that represented a feeling that I felt like I needed. So I picked love, courage, strength, like bad vibes, be gone type of a crystal. And she was like, every time you feel sad, you hold on to your crystals and all of those feelings are going to absorb into your body. And that was the only thing that made me stop crying for hours and hours and hours as a child.
Wow.
I know. My mom is a hippie.
I love it. No, so you were an empath from a very, very young age. Like,
I was just so emotional. Yes, I think I was an empath. And it's funny because now seeing my nephew and niece so my nephew is 12. He's actually been on my podcast. He's a hit. Donnie.
I saw him on your podcast. He's amazing.
He's incredible. And my niece, Georgia, who's only 5, but the minute she's old enough, and if she wants to be on my podcast, because they all seem to want this, like my nephew doesn't even ask how I'm doing. He's like, when can you interview me again? But what I've started seeing is that this highly sensitive, emotional character, it's in them too. And it's not in every kid that I've met, but it's definitely in them. And like when Donovan is sad, he's sad, but he has this incredible emotional intelligence that is like far beyond his years. And I think for the adults in my life, they could see that in me. My grandma would always say, like, you weren't like a regular kid. Like, you didn't ask the questions that little kids ask. You didn't say the things little kids said. You would say deep things that would always shock me. Like, one day she asked why she couldn't learn English because, we moved to the States when I was 5, and I learned English within the first 3 years. And my grandma would be like, how come I can't learn? I was a teacher and I learned all of these things. And I looked at her and I was 7 years old, couldn't have been older than 7. I'm like, Grandma, because our brains are like computers and yours is full because you know so much. Mine is empty because I'm a kid. And she would talk about that because she just observed this little kid with this weird. Or I would always ask questions like, why are you always putting Grandpa's plate and he never puts your plate? Like, he should put your plate, as in like for food. I was always questioning things. I was always emotional and questioning why things were the way that they were.
How did that curiosity impact your ability to connect with people?
Oh, Alexis, these questions are so good. Chef's kiss. And I ask questions for a living. I ask journal prompts. Honestly, these are so good. So I think when you have this highly sensitive character, it's like almost a superpower that you don't know how to handle. And so for a lot of my young childhood years, I kept quiet. I kept to myself because I knew that whatever relationships, like I knew that it would be too much because my family would always be like, you're too much. You cry too much. You feel too much. It's too much. So much so that my sister got me a journal when I was around 8 because she was tired of hearing about my feelings. And she's like, just write it down. I don't want to hear it. Which is a funny twist in the story. So I had all of these feelings. I didn't know how to connect to human beings. So I was really connecting to myself, and I would spend a lot of time in music. I loved learning lyrics, but like of deep songs. It wasn't like pop princess songs. It was like the strife of being like a Black person in America, or like what it is to experience a true heartbreak. These were the lyrics that I was learning. And then I started writing, and I would just write. I had one dear, dear friend that was a friend from basically as soon as I could speak English, so around 7 years old until 1920. We were thick as thieves, and we were like sisters. We did everything together. And then that was basically it. I had that one friend, and it was like a deep bond, like a family bond. It wasn't like I had a bunch of friends. And then in high school, I had a boyfriend. We connected, but I didn't really know how to harness the superpower until college.
What does harnessing the superpower, what did that like look like for you?
It was basically realizing that people talk to people all day long, every day, but that doesn't mean that everybody leaves a lasting impression. And what I noticed is that I could talk to people, and I could talk to people in all ages. So it wasn't like I was only talking to people my age. I was actually gravitating more towards people that were a lot older than me. And they would say things to me to be like, wait, I've never had a conversation like this with someone your age. Actually, a funny story about this that I haven't thought about in a long time. My first job legally, because I was always cleaning houses with my mom, but legally, I was a translator at a chiropractic office in Connecticut, in Bethel, Connecticut, which is like this pretty ritzy town. We were there. We didn't have much money, but we could like clean the houses of the people who live there. Anyways, I got this job and I was translating. And when there wasn't anybody to translate for, I'd be in the spa room where the guests would come in and they would be face down, and I would like put these electrode pads on their back and then just sit there and chat with them with their face down in the spa tables. So a lot of times people would come in, not see me. They would just like go in, plop their face down, and I would do the job. And then I would just sit there. And if they wanted to chat, they would chat with me. And there was this one man, I'm talking to him about life. I'm asking questions. I'm just like doing what has always come naturally to me. And when he stood up, he was like, where's the lady I was speaking to? Where's the woman that I was just having a conversation with? I was like, no, that was me. And I was 16 at the time. This man probably was in his mid-50s. He was like, I could have sworn that I was talking to a grown adult woman.
Wow.
So this was the moment where I started learning, like, there's something here where curiosity has this amazing ability to connect to people. It doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter what you come from, what you look like, the background. Being curious, if it's genuine, it will blow people's mind every time. And also it's just a cooler way to live because you learn so many new things. And I'm genuinely interested in everybody.
Yeah. The perspective that you bring with you into every interaction is different because you're walking into it with open palms. You're receptive to whatever the exchange might turn into. I think that's really beautiful. You mentioned moving here when you were 5. What was that like for you culturally? You know, leaving your country of origin, coming to the States. How was that where you're still honoring where you came from and you're also learning about this new place you're in as a child?
Oh, Alexis, I could give you a freaking award for these questions. Wow. So we just need to do this at dinner too. We're going to do this over. Yeah, there's part 2 of the podcast over dinner.
Yes.
So when I first moved to the States, when my family and I moved to the States, because obviously I was only 5, I was about to turn 6. I had a lot of, and I still have a lot of memories from that time. I know some people only have childhood memories after a certain like age, maybe 7, 8. But I'll remember things that even my older brother and sister don't remember. So it wasn't like I was coming in with this completely blank slate. It was crystal clear. Like I remember the routines that I had with my grandparents. I remember the smell of the beans in the pressure cooker. I remember what it was to be playing in the garden with a rainstorm coming, like the smell of I remember all of it. And it was my life. And then we get on a plane. And I remember my mom pitched it as like, we're going to go on an adventure. who's excited? And of course, if you tell a kid we're going on an adventure, you're going to be stoked. So she framed it perfectly. Maybe I get my gifts of storytelling from my mom.
Yes.
Or like sales with quotation marks, because she knows how to frame a story to make it sound awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, when you say, how would you like to go on an adventure? You're not thinking you're going to need to learn a new language. You're going to be away from your family. You're going to be away from everything that you know. You're going to look differently. No one's going to understand you. Like those things were not part of this adventure that we were all on. So when we get to the States, I remember we landed in JFK and it was super cold and it was May. JFK and New York does not get cold in May, but when you're from Rio in Brazil, May is cold.
Mm.
And it was like the first sign that like, this isn't what I know. Like, it was just like, we need to buy sweaters. Like that was the first, we went to Walmart to like buy sweaters. And then from that point on, I just remember we had these cousins that like spoke really terrible Portuguese, but they spoke English, and they were the first hybrids that I learned about that like could help. And it was full blown, all hands on deck. We must learn this language. There's no other option. And again, when you're a kid, there's a lot of secrecy. Like you don't know how long are we going to be here? Is this permanent? But I remember when my mom, I would overhear conversations of her having, she was trying to enroll us in a school and like trying to figure out how to do it. And she didn't know any of the paperwork because it was all in English. So she had to ask for help with her brother and her friends and blah, blah, blah. And then when we got to the school and I was just kind of like dropped off, I was like, oh, like it started to click. It's like, we can't go back now. And there's nothing like being plopped in a schoolroom with 20 other kids that are completely different complexion. Everybody was white with blonde hair or brunette hair, very fair skin. No one understood me. They didn't know what I was saying. They didn't know what language I spoke. I didn't understand them. And like, this is my childhood. And so it was like an extreme body language detection of like, where should I be? Do I say this? How do I go to the bathroom? And I actually ended up peeing my pants in the first grade because I didn't know how to say, can I go to the bathroom? Like the language barrier was so thick that I didn't even know how to save myself from an embarrassing peeing pants moment. So that was the beginning of little Jo. And so I had all these feelings. And if anything, this exacerbated the feelings. But I learned quickly that like you really can make it work, even if you're just following the crowd. You're like, I need to do this because they're doing this. And some examples of how this backfired, there was a line, we had to line up once, and there was a big bin, a plastic bin filled with books. And I understood that I could pick a free book because every student in front of me was just picking a book. And so I went in and picked the very thickest one because I loved books. I loved reading, even though I was only 5 at this point. I was 6, but I loved reading because in Brazil, I read all the time with my grandma. I picked the thickest book, and then I get a letter that my mom's friend had to translate. That homework was, you need to finish the book in one night and write a paragraph of what you had read.
What?
And my mom and I were both crying like, oh no, I picked the biggest book. And at the time there was no Google Translate. It was just sitting there with an electronic dictionary. Like, and this is how I learned. It was like a very much painful. My mom couldn't help me. It wasn't like I had a mom that could help with homework. She didn't understand half of it. Around 8 years old, I finally learned English, and then I became more of a parent, in quotes, because I could translate things that she couldn't. And then I started seeing like, oh, if you speak a different language, you have this power that's so incredible that pulls you out of class to translate for other kids. You could tell mom what to do. Like it was just, then I kind of got like a little crazy where I felt like I was a kid, but I had another superhero kind of persona that I could toggle between things. And there was also a time where I learned that there's such a difference between translating and interpreting.
Wow. What a powerful story. I also want to acknowledge like the isolation that you felt. And you were describing how you felt isolated almost in your own self with your feelings. And then you're also in an environment where you're different and you felt isolated there. And then there was this shift where you started to feel empowered through the fact that you were different. And I think that's like
linguistically, I can say linguistically I was empowered.
Okay.
Identity-wise, I wasn't, because there were two things happening. There was the assimilation to the American culture, and there was the abandoning of the Brazilian culture. And the more English I learned, the worse my Portuguese became. And then this is where the war really started, the identity war within me. It was when I called my family in Brazil, and we each had like 5 minutes because we used to have to use scratch off calling cards back in the day. And in those 5 minutes, I remember feeling defeated because my aunts would be like, Joania, what a funny little accent you have. And I started getting pissed. I'm like, I don't want to be told that I sound bad. So then I started being embarrassed. So there was this shame that I carried of I'm not Brazilian anymore. So screw it. I'm going to try to be as American as possible. But then I couldn't be American enough either. And it took me until I was in my early 20s to understand the benefit of being an in-betweener and owning that. So I saw the linguistic power and I claimed it. And it made me want to learn French and Italian and Spanish and all these other languages that I now speak because it is a tangible superpower. But the identity was a lot more nuanced.
That makes sense. How did you decide what it is that you wanted to create? Because you've always been a creator. You've always been an artist. Whenever you were in your early 20s, how did you take these skills of curiosity, connecting with other people, being someone of high emotional intelligence, speaking different languages, and turn it into something that made you want to wake up every morning and create and like as a job? What was that process like?
Well, it's so funny you say that, Alexis, because I literally never thought I was a creator or creative. I didn't embrace that at all. I was actively like, no, I'm not a creative because my brother and sister are incredibly talented. And I grew up with these two like super talented in their own domains siblings where my brother's an incredible illustrator. Is like, if I show you the work he does, you'd be like, that's AI. Like, no, that's my brother in his spare time with 2 kids, a house, a mortgage, a wife. Like he's got all the, these beautiful creations with such little time. And my sister's an incredible singer. And so she would be the lead of all of the musicals in the school and they were both like these superhuman creatives. And I could never find my thing. I tried singing, but it was my sister's thing. I tried art, but that was my brother's thing. And I wasn't ever bad, but I wasn't the best. And I was looking for the thing that I could say, like, that's my thing. I played the violin and I was good, but I wasn't so great. Played the saxophone, I was good. Like I was quote unquote the best in the school, but I wasn't gifted to what I considered gifted in comparison. And how much of our stories is shaped by our narratives as kids, right? So that narrative created this working machine where like I wanted to find what I was good in. And then I was convinced that I'm not the creative one, they are. But instead, what I can do is be organized. I can be a business person. I can create something out of nothing, but it's going to be a business. And I didn't see that as creative. So even as early as high school, opened the school store from scratch. Like there was just a random gaping window in the high school. And I'm like, can I turn this into a school store? I looked at the legislation. I found a person to hire for the management. I went to this Costco to get stock. And that was my first calling of like, oh, I can build this tiny school store and make enough profit to send us to Washington, D.C. for a leadership conference. Like, I think I'm onto something.
Wow.
Or like, oh, I can organize these blood drives that break records in the county because I can create the promo for it and I can create the hype. So by the time I got to college, I still didn't think I was a creative. It was very much, I'm a business person. I want to have a global business career where I speak languages and I want to travel. And that was the vibe. So the creator identity only came last year, I think. And I'm 32.
Really? Well,
yeah.
It's interesting how we attach meaning to certain things. So, being in business, that's, organizational. There's a level of professionalism. Being a creator is more fluid. And it's like those two things can actually exist at the same time. And I think that's a part of any individual's journey, yours, mine, and everyone's, where it's like the duality. And so you're living in, hey, I'm a business owner and I'm a businesswoman. I am business minded. I'm strategic. I execute. And also I'm incredibly creative and I allow, what's in my brain to make its way onto paper or make its way into a call with your community. And so it's like allowing the two things to exist. But whenever we start to like have harsh definition boxes, that's where it's like, I'm either this, but I can't be that. How did that kind of play its way into, I would say, like the decade of your 20s?
Well, I think there's such a funny connection between the crisis of identity with my professional life. Oh no, you froze.
I'm here.
Okay, I'm going to start again.
Yeah.
I think it's funny when we look at the connection between the identity crisis that I had, but also that I think many of us have, not only with my identity when it comes to nationalities and culture, but also with my career path and who am I? Am I creative? Am I a business person? Am I an artist? Am I a founder? What am I? And throughout my 20s, I didn't, to be honest, I was working so hard that I didn't think about the definitions. I was just working. I was working on this entrepreneurial vision. I was building my career. I was creating 3 videos a week. And I still told myself that I wasn't a creative because in the duo that I was in, I was the business part with quotes because my business partner and I, we worked together from 2012 to 2019. And the entire time from the beginning to the end, we both did all of the editing. Like I can film a video from scratch. I can edit a video from scratch. I can direct a video. I can pick a location. I can create the video. And we would do those videos sometimes together, sometimes alone. But then when the videos were done, I would be the one looking at the companies that had posted press releases about new initiatives. I would be researching who wants a young travel channel, who wants to spend money on advertising. And I'd be finding those CEOs and I'd be crafting the emails and I'd be getting on the calls with them and I'd be pitching them. So I was very much the business side, even though storytelling wise and creative with editing, with visuals, I was doing that as well.
Right.
But it was because I had this skill. We just said, okay, you do creative and I do business. And while I was doing the pitching, my business partner would be like doing fonts and things on the presentation decks that I did. Like he would be making it visually more appealing. It wasn't that I couldn't do it. It's just that we like picked lanes that we both felt better in. So that was my 20s.
Which is natural as a business partner. Like it's natural to find, okay, these are the things I'm going to own. These are the things that you're going to own. I want to talk about the inception of Damon and Jo in 2012. What instigated or like what was the genesis of let's start a YouTube channel?
It's so funny. Now I can talk about it like as a 32-year-old, which, you know, when you're 20, you don't think about what your 32-year-old version is going to be thinking about the crazy stuff you're doing. We were insane in the best way possible. The idea came about specifically because in college, we wanted to do cool stuff. We wanted to live this like memorable college life. And we met in the Facebook group of like, I want to learn it was the incoming freshman group. And I was like, just took the French placement exam. So excited. Who's studying languages? Damon messaged me and we just started messaging all summer before we got into college. So we had this funny dynamic of like, here's this kid from the Midwest. Here I am in Connecticut, like immigrant girl, nothing in common, but we loved the idea of languages and travel. I lived on the world cultures floor in college. He didn't get in. And so he was always with me. So we had this funny, like we were so opposite, but similar dynamic. Mm-hmm. And it only came to life because we would plan these big trips with friends because we had a big group of friends and everybody would bail. And the only 2 people that would be there would be me and him. And so we started learning like, oh, people are all talk. Like everybody that says that they're going to come to you to Montreal, they're actually all talk, but who's really going to be there? So from the beginning, we had this like business partnership kind of energy. And it wasn't until we both studied abroad in Paris where I had no job and he always wanted to make videos and I wanted to be an international businesswoman that we started filming. And I was like, oh, what character am I? What character are you? And of course, now looking back, I was a little producer, like a story producer. In the time, I'm like, I'm just a businesswoman who's having fun with my good friend Damon. Now I'm like, are you kidding me? You're literally an executive producer. And not only that, you can go to LinkedIn and boldly find the right people to get the right meetings to get you actual money for this creative idea. So like now I want to shake my 20-year-old Jo to be like, are you silly? Like what? You're a creator, you're creative, you're a producer, you're an executive producer who will do many cool things in your life.
Yeah.
At the time, I was just trying to get paid to travel, to have cool experiences. And we did. So we started Damon and Jo, the channel. And first it was to pitch TV executives. They all said no. So the first 2 years was just getting no's. And then we decided to move to Los Angeles in 2015. And it was guns blazing, no backup plan. I had tons of college debt. And it was just like every morning we'd wake up, we had a cork board with our stats. I would update the cork board. We'd put it in an Excel doc. We'd be like, here are our goals for next week. What are the ideas? What are we filming? We need 3 videos a week. And then we blew up our channel from like 40,000 in the beginning of, it was July of 2015 with 40,000 subscribers. And before the next year, we had 200,000 subscribers. And it was because there was this like ruthless desire to succeed. There was no going back. And I had gotten full-time job offers and I turned them down because it was too easy for me to see what that life could be. Because it was this corporate travel agency and I was working and the CMO would always like take the credit for the work I was doing. Because I was doing what I always do, which is like, here's this cool idea. I'm going to execute it. I'm going to build it all. And then everybody's like, wow, the marketing department has never been so helpful. And I did everything. And then they offered me a crappy salary that they then offered to somebody else for 25K more. So the journey from then on was just like, I can't go back. Like if I need to, I can, but I won't. I won't go back. And I never did.
Right. You saw your value as an entrepreneur founder more than what you would have been inside of a company at that stage.
Yeah, I think you could be very successful in a company if you have the bosses who are championing you, if you have sponsors within the company, somebody that's going to be like, Alexis deserves a promotion because Alexis is changing how this company is being perceived and it's changing the culture. If you have that champion from within, a corporate environment is probably the best place for you to be because you'll get the support and you get the salary, which is stability that gives you peace of mind to stay fresh. If you have a boss who will continue to take credit for your work, limit your ceiling, like create this box that you still find a way to be creative in, it's just not a win-win situation. And that was the boss that I had. And actually, funny enough, I pitched a job to the best boss that I had. I had this intern boss who was the CMO of this other agency. And I literally pitched him a job. And you know what he said? I was like, can I work for you? I'm graduating. I'm pitching this show, but it's not working. I need a job. He's like, Joanna, I've been following what you're doing on LinkedIn. And I genuinely think you have too much of a success in entrepreneurship to give you a job. So he declined me a job. And that's a good boss. Like that's an example of what a good boss would have been. But because I was sharing what I was doing, he was like, I can't limit you. I'm not doing this to you.
Wow. That's an amazing leader. And for him to see that and you call that out and not take advantage of someone that has so much talent, he's like, no, you need to go do this on your own. So I want to fast forward a little bit. You start the channel, you're rocking it. It's growing. You hit 1 million subscribers. In the meantime, over the years, you and Damon started a travel agency called Shut Up and Go. Or what?
We started, it was like the vision for that was I had always wanted to create something bigger than myself. Like from day one, I think the school store days taught me that like success for you is cool, but actually success when you could fly the whole team out to DC, it just hits differently. So for me, I always wanted to create something that was bigger than the Damon and Jo brand. Always, always, always. And so we ended up trademarking Shut Up and Go LLC, or that was our LLC, but we trademarked Shut Up and Go. And that was the vision. I was like, okay, how can we create a travel and leisure for young people, like a young platform to talk about these stories about study abroad and romances that you have when you're traveling and long distance relationships and how to learn the language and keep failing. So we paid this agency to design this sleek website. I brokered a partnership to white label Skyscanner's flight booking technology. So we were like the only creator platform where you could literally book flights, like flights.shutupandgo.travel was a domain name that you could book your flights. We'd make affiliate sales from that. So the site, and this is while it's still doing the channel. Like I was still doing the videos every week and also training collaborators from around the world that were writing articles on the site. And I was super specific of like, here are the articles that I want. Here's how you write. I hired our first employee, which was the editor, because then I could train him to train them. And I just did what I can't help but do. Like at this point now in my life, I'm like, I literally can't help but do this. I can't help it. I see an idea. I think it's amazing or it's maybe crappy, but I start it anyways. And I continue to chip away and I revise and I revise and I make it better and I fail and I continue to do it because it's more fun. So anyway, Shut Up and Go was this big platform and we were able to start giving contributors brand deals that we were no longer accepting because they were too low fees or like not convenient where we were. And that was my goal. I was like, how cool would it be to give young aspiring creatives a chance to travel and do a bike tour with the Tourism Board of New Mexico. And like, we were doing that. Like that was happening. But then internally, there were some conflicts with my vision, Damon's vision. We outgrew the brand, I honestly think. And it makes sense because we started when we were like 19 years old. And at this point, I'm about to turn 28. Like, there's no similarity in how we were. And the young travel brand really developed into something else. And we started making videos on our own. And all of the videos that I was making, they were just completely different from the Damon and Jo brand. It was about financial literacy. It was about books that I read that made me smarter. It was about reconnecting to my family. Like these deep, deep things. I was kind of going back to this deep emotional state, which, you know, they say money doesn't change you. It just shows you who you've always been.
Yeah.
And like when I had the money to just do whatever, what was I doing? I was going back to the emotional stuff. I was going back to writing. I was going back to the roots.
Yeah, there is something too when you get to a place financially where you do feel secure and you also are approaching 30, and I'm just speaking on behalf of myself, you do get really reflective of like, what is it that I want? What was this last decade? You go into some childhood stuff. Like, there's something about approaching a new big decade milestone where you really start to do some of that internal work. I know that the decision to kind of stop creating on Damon and Jo and doing things on your own individually also came with, you had this massive community and love for both of you online. And there was kind of this separation in the business and in the friendship that was very public.
Very public and very painful and very a part of this journey.
I can only imagine. I want to ask how you managed your mental health through that season, because I think when we go through difficult seasons, even though they might be our choice, we have chosen to take a different path. It still comes with a level of grief and a level of recognizing like, wow, what was is no longer. Like, what's ahead of me is going to be different than what we just did and what I just did and who I'm becoming. What was it like to go through that online in such a public way and then taking care of yourself privately, you know, as you kind of grew through that chapter?
Well, let me ask you, Alexis, from the outsiders, what did it seem like? Like, what did you interpret from the events? Because the way I explain it will always be biased because it's me.
Of course. I would say, and again, I did not follow that. This was 4 years ago. So I was not aware or like in the YouTube space at that point. But I would say from my research, what I saw was a kind of a level of maybe isolation where you kind of isolated, maybe similar to actually this conversation around your childhood where you would go internal and then you maybe took a pause and you said, okay, this is like where I'm going from here. I know at the same time you were working on the Netflix hosting show. So I'm sure that there was a lot going on behind the scenes, but maybe there was from the outside, you kind of took a step back from being in the public eye to kind of focus on taking care of yourself.
Work the stuff out. Yes. It's so funny when we think about this theme of isolation. It's true. So basically with the Damon and Jo chapter, it was an amazing conquest. Like, it genuinely was triumphant. Here we were, these broke college kids, and we were able to work so hard on this creative vision that we genuinely shared, that we put equal amount of effort into, that we were up all night, pulling all-nighters to make happen. Changing culture. Like, we really did change culture. So many people still recognize me being like, you're the first person that I saw traveling that looks like me, or I learned my first language because of that channel, or I took a trip and I met my husband. And it's like extraordinary to be able to say that your 20s left an impact that genuinely did change people's lives and how they saw themselves and how they saw travel, and that it wasn't just for people that were rich and retired. So there's all of this positive that happened. The inside stuff that was happening was me coming to terms with the fact that the success that I was having was keeping me away from my family, my friends, any opportunity to have a genuine relationship romantically. Because when you work in travel, you get paid to travel. And if somebody says, I have a job for you in Singapore, you're packing your bags and you go. And I loved that in the beginning, but I didn't love it when I was about to turn 30, because I thought to myself, I have niece and nephews I want to be close to. I want them to know who I am. My mom is getting older. I want to visit my family. Is this going to be another decade of me doing things that make me successful, but take me away from everything that I love? Mm-hmm. So that was the backstory of like, I was already going through this emotionally. And then in the crux of the business stuff, Damon and I were just disagreeing on things. We had different visions of what those next 10 years would look like. And that's really hard to swallow, because here you have this partnership that worked really, really well, and it's very successful publicly. But the vision that we were conveying was no longer valid on the inside. Mm-hmm. The cameras stopped rolling, and it's not this hunky-dory friendship anymore. So I was already like, this must come to an end. And I gave proposals of an exit strategy, and we couldn't agree. We couldn't agree. And I think it's because when we started the business, it wasn't started as a business. We just found extreme success. There wasn't an exit strategy. So one of the big takeaways from that chapter is like, make sure if you do a business partnership that it's not 50-50. And if it is 50-50, that you have a contingency plan for if one person disagrees, and you have an exit strategy in the most amicable way if everything burns up. Because what ended up happening was that because we couldn't agree, we basically just had to abandon the channel. It's still a lot online, but like the AdSense stopped. It's kind of like dying a slow death. The business shut up and go. That was like part 2 of the divorce. And we had to take down the site because there was no other way to not. Like, we must take down the site because there are so many links in the site. So the entire ecosystem that we spent so much time developing just dead, killed it. Instagram account. So everything that we worked so hard for essentially died a slow death, which is fine because I know what it was. The people who saw it knew what it was. And you can still see the videos on the channel if you're so inclined. But the bigger thing that was happening internally was just like, what's next? And what can be more aligned? And what can be true today and in 10 years and in 20 years? Like, what has always been true? And at the same time, I got this email from Netflix producers who wanted to audition both me and Damon, and they auditioned us 3 times as a duo. And I straight up was like, I don't think that this is right. I don't want to continue this. This is not like, this would be a continuation of this journey that I've already decided I don't want to be a part of. And then I get a call saying, hey, they just want to continue with you to the casting round, which I thought was crazy because never once had they said, hey, we could move along with just one of you, you know?
Okay.
So I ended up going to the audition.
So you were having that conversation internally about not wanting to move forward, but that wasn't something that you were talking with Netflix about. You were just like, okay, what if this like continues into something else?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like even though I felt what I didn't want, it wasn't that I didn't want the show. I didn't want to continue another 10 years of the brand that I was already aware was taking me away from what I loved, which was family, connection, like the things that you can't possibly nurture if you're always traveling.
Yeah, you wanted to be rooted, and that business that you had built was like kind of taking you away from the roots that you were trying to establish into the next decade. So you get the Netflix job.
Well, so here was what's crazy. It wasn't even that I got the Netflix job. I just got told that they wanted to audition me like as a solo person.
Okay.
And the minute that they tell me this, I was like, so I'm not a crazy person. Like, I'm not crazy. Like, these feelings of there's something different between us now is so obvious that they didn't even want to audition us in person together as a duo, even though we had an audience of 1.2 million subscribers. So it was like this crazy thing, like, oh, damn, these people see it. Okay, there must be something here that I should see. And I end up booking the job. Like, and it wasn't an easy interview either, because you basically are on a blind date with people that you're supposed to be co-hosting with. They're just trying to see who has chemistry. And I ended up having chemistry with these 2 other hosts. And so I booked this job. But before I knew that I booked the job, there was a dark 2 months where I gave up on Damon and Jo. We publicized that we were no longer continuing. I broke up with my agent that I was with because they didn't even see me as a solo talent because they were loving the Damon and Jo brand deals. And they were like, what could you possibly do on your own? Broke up with an ex, and I went to New Zealand. And I had a trip planned with my ex with him to go to New Zealand. I still went to this yoga retreat and started journaling, filled up 150 pages. And this is when I realized, like, oh, the thing that has always been constant has been journaling, has been storytelling, has been languages and connections and people and deep things. Didn't know what I was going to do with it. Started filming the show, was great, but not it. Like, it wasn't all that there was to me. Production stopped because of COVID. In those 4 months, I started sharing pictures of my writing. And then 90 days later, Jo Club started.
Wow. Okay, so I want to talk about the inception of Jo Club. So you start sharing your journals online. When did you know that it was going to turn into a business, or was there an aspect of it where you were still figuring out what was next, or was there like you had this vision of creating Jo Club, a journaling company? It was going to be a community. Like, did you have that in the beginning, or was this truly just kind of metamorphosizing over time as you were getting input from your community?
It was the latter.
Okay.
So I'm like laughing thinking about this because it was so wild. People listening might feel this where you have many passions, many interests, and maybe they don't make sense. A lot of my interests seemingly did not make sense together. So when I was away and I was writing a lot of like, what makes me happy? What has always given me energy? Here were the things on the list. Journaling, but also writing, not just journaling, writing, creative writing, language learning, traveling for people, for depth, for connection, family, relationships, love. And I'm like, okay, cool. I have the list of things I love. How in the world can I make this a business? Do I even have to make this a business? Right. So I was asking myself all of these questions. When the Netflix show began filming, it was actually a crazy record scratch because I went into isolation, not necessarily by choice, but because on the contract, they were like, you can't show any of your co-hosts, can't show any of the properties. You can't do anything unless we approve it. So it was just like, okay, I guess I'm going on hiatus because unless you bulk film and schedule it, you're not really able to film. You have one day off of production. So I got offline. And the thing about growing up making videos is that it's how you process your life, right? This isn't just like, for me at least, it was like, I would go to Italy and I would have this amazing time and then I would make a vlog and I would learn more Italian and I would like think about how beautiful that moment was and I would cherish the time with the host family. So it was like a digestion for me to make videos and I couldn't anymore.
Yeah.
So the Netflix show challenged me, not only professionally for the job itself, but because it took away what I had always done. But I never stopped journaling. Like in between takes, I would be writing. My co-host would ask me, what are you writing? And I would just be like, oh, I'm just writing. I'm writing about the property. I'm writing about poetry. I'm writing about what I'm feeling. When I started posting these entries, it was because I had seen that on a shoot that's so crazy, the one thing they couldn't stop me from doing was journaling. And it meant a lot because I'm like, wow, if I can't control anything in my life, but I still make time to write, that's a lot. That's saying something. And posting it just felt natural. I was just like, hey, I've journaled for years, but like I never shared it. Here it is. And then somebody just asked, hey, start a 30-day challenge here on Instagram because we're all in lockdown. It would be really cool to journal together. And that person was the catalyst to this challenge that I started the very next day. Didn't really plan it out. You know, I'm more of an activator. Like I said, I have an idea and I start it and then I very much improve it as it's growing.
Right.
I loved what was happening because the minute I posted a question and I started seeing entries with different handwriting, different languages all over the world, I'm like, wow, this is something cool. Like I've never seen something like this where people are vulnerable enough to share their deep, deep thoughts. Like this is so dope. And then I saw like, imagine somebody from Singapore is sharing and then their friends are seeing. And then suddenly somebody that's following them thinks like, oh, maybe I should journal. And I feel better now. Around day 70, I kept it going till day 90. But around day 70, I started asking myself because the entrepreneur in me started waking up. I'm still on a break from production. Don't know when the show's coming back. But I'm like, would people pay to be in a Zoom room together doing this together? I had never seen something like this before. This wasn't something that I had modeled. Like I literally had never seen this. You know, online learning was just becoming a thing. And I coded the website, put together a benefits package and was like, okay, you get one live journaling session a month, daily prompts to your inbox that I was writing every day. So I became a prompt writer. Like my job was literally asking questions. Had my first 7 members. And in the first call, I had no idea what I would do with them. And it was only an hour. I extended it to an hour and a half. And it was the coolest thing I had experienced just because it was like, when else am I going to have a deep conversation with somebody in Finland about this conversation that we're now having because of this prompt?
Wow.
And you like reflect. So we would actually journal together we'd journal individually with music and everything. And then we'd share. And that was the magic that I could never achieve on my own. Because I could journal. I've journaled so many different things in my life, but I had never had that vulnerable, safe space to like talk to someone about what was happening and be like, what did you think about that prompt? How did you perceive it? And then have their perceptions of it blow my mind because I was thinking about myself when they were thinking about others, or they were thinking about external, like, so there were all of these magical things that couldn't have happened had it not been in community that became the magic sauce of Jo Club. Jo Club is a journaling business, but not just to get you to write. It's really a journaling business to get you to write and have an individual experience, but very much share it in a space with a culture that we've refined day after day after day to create this homey, safe space for the most introverted of people to the most burnt out, extroverted of people, and everybody in between.
Wow. It's truly beautiful, the community that you've built. And I love hearing that it's not even just about getting people to reflect and process and build that self-awareness, but there is that extra step where they're going internal and then they're figuring out ways to actually process that with a group of safe people. And it's such a gift that you've given the world. I want to know the step from you've got your first 7 members. The entrepreneur in me is like, you've qualified the business idea. Now what? Like, how did you then grow it into what it is now from 7 members to hundreds of members?
So this is the part where I feel like this is also relatable. When you're trying to juggle many things, nothing gets done well. You get everything done, but like kind of half-zs. So when I started Jo Club, I didn't even know if the show was going to come back to production. And I started it, I think it was in June, and in July, we started filming the show again, the Netflix show. And so we were in production from July of 2020 until January of 2021. And I only had one day off, and it was Sundays. And so in the time that I was shooting the show, I would like try to promote Jo Club and be like, hey, we're meeting this Sunday. And so growth was not the way that growth would have been had I started it where it's like blank slate. This is all, I'm going all in on this. So the first 6 months of Jo Club were just like, honestly, a mental wellness thing for me, because I loved, even if it was my one day off, I loved hosting those sessions so much so that I added 2 sessions a month. So while I was on the show, I'm like, these are doing me so much good that we're going to actually add a second session because I need these check-ins.
Right. Was the membership growing through the 6 months, even if it was slow?
It was growing. And I was trying to also learn the techniques of direct sales marketeers. And like, I was trying to understand, like, how do you get somebody to join your newsletter list? And it's a completely different skill set than what I had been doing for the first chapter of my entrepreneurship. I was really good at being on camera. I was really good at making something fun. I was a great translator for concepts or brands or products. So I had a successful career as like that, like a creator that could be a hype person for anything, especially if I really believed in it, and only if I believed in it. Like I would find the truth. Mm-hmm. But I had never learned what like a lead magnet was and what an email sequence was and how to give people a special offer and how to deliver a webinar and what to do after the webinar. I had never learned those things. And those things, those like very skilled marketeering skills are the things that I then spent the next 3+ years learning. So essentially the timeline was finish the Netflix show. Jo Club was then my main priority. The Damon and Jo thing was just a sadness in my heart because it was like, but this is just crumbling. We weren't doing anything about it. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to put all my energy into Jo Club. I don't know how the Netflix show is going to perform, but it doesn't matter. This is what I want to do. I was doing a few brand deals here and there as Joe Franco, but I was struggling to find my angle. Like, what do I talk about? Is it journaling? Is it travel? Is it language? Like, I'm confused myself. If I'm confused, they're confused. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, I was still keeping things afloat, financially speaking. And then the Netflix show comes out. And even still, like I had a big uptick in followers and it was this like top 10 show and it was awesome, but the show wasn't portraying the depth that I was like, I refused to do anything unless there's depth involved. Like I need some stuff because I didn't come this far to be service level.
Yep. Again, so then
root.
You were in like, I want roots.
I need it. It was a
Yeah.
non-negotiable.
Yeah.
But it meant risking the like success that I had gained, because a lot of the success that I gained was not in that. It was like in booty dropping in front of monuments. Like it was in silly, funny things that I loved, but it wasn't the chapter anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, Jo Club becomes my main priority, and it was painful. It was a slow growing machine because there were so many skills that I didn't know. Like I had to learn how to code, do things on Elementor, on WordPress. And I went through tons of different platforms tech-wise of how do you manage the membership? Is it Memberful? Is it like what is it? And I tested the tech and I tried automations. So the last 3 years, I would say, have been very much a master's degree in like online business.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm in a place where I'm like, okay, I got it.
You feel more solid, more secure in like the business that you've built. So what specific strategy for you did you feel like grew Jo Club to where it is? Because you mentioned webinars, lead magnets, newsletter. Like, was there one strategy or tactic that you found really resonating with your audience?
Well, so there's a question mark in the midst of the thing growing, of Jo Club growing, that I had to answer,
Mm-hmm.
which was, am I the only person running these sessions? Because, there's this saying that if you have to be somewhere, it's a job. If you don't have to be somewhere, it's a business. Like you're an entrepreneur.
Mm.
I loved hosting the sessions, but I started asking myself, like, can I offer more sessions? Because the membership is growing and I can't possibly quench the thirst of hundreds of people with 2 sessions a month, me hosting them. So a big problem that I had to solve is like, how do I scale this? How do I train people? Can I train people? And that was in 2022 that I started thinking seriously about what would it look like to have other people be the face of my company that I've grown from such a heart-filled place. And so then, like everything else in my life, I was like, it's an idea worth exploring. Let me send an email to some of the members that I think would be great. Every single person that I emailed responded saying they were interested. I created like 3 different training calls. Then I had to rip apart what I had been doing by myself into 2 different roles, because I realized you're managing tech, you're a DJ because you're playing the music, you're presenting your slides, you're making your slides, you're facilitating the room. And that's a lot for one person.
Yeah.
So I trained my first 6 facilitators. And then I was able to say, okay, now I have a business that I can technically scale, because I've seen that it's successful with other people. Because a lot of people were like, Jo, that's stupid. Like, why would you try to scale? Would people even join if you're not the one hosting the sessions? And I'm like, I won't know until I try, but I certainly can't live my life being the bottleneck of everything.
Right.
So against other people's advice, I trained everybody. And now it's been amazing to see the team flourish and like find their own creative outlets through the sessions. And then the thing that really stuck after that, a few different things. I think the webinar model definitely sticks, because with live journaling, it's something that you don't experience anywhere else, really. I've started seeing companies popping up now doing it. And I'm like, I got 4 years on y'all. Like, I've literally been mastering the flow of event.
Yeah.
I've read tons of books. I've studied how do you create a culture in a room virtually or in physical spaces. So I would say the webinar gives them a sample of like, oh, I've never seen something like this. Like, I can see how this is useful. It's almost like the Costco sampler. Like you actually feel like you're experiencing it. And then the other thing is I think the retreats. So funny. So I started doing retreats last year. No, 2 years ago now. And another crazy idea that I'm like, let's see what happens. Sent an email, retreat gets sold out. And only one non-member came. She became a lifelong member. And now half the people who come are non-Jo Clubbers. But then after, they usually become Jo Clubbers, because they're like, oh, this is where the community I've been looking for has been. I didn't know this existed.
What's the pricing model of Jo Club, and then what's the pricing model for the retreats?
So with Jo Club, we do monthly, quarterly, and yearly. And we also have Jo Club Fluent, which I launched last year for language learning, because that's also been a passion of mine. So I was successfully able to squeeze all of those ingredients in this wild business plan that no one else could have written but me. So both Jo Club and Jo Club Fluent, it's $45 a month. Quarterly, I think it's like I don't know what quarterly is off the top of my head. Yearly for the bundles, $3.99. And most people actually buy yearly packages because it's like a self-investment. When you join Jo Club, it's really like this mental and emotional gym. And we have 10 sessions a month of live journaling calls that you can pop into. We also do the daily prompts via email. when I see what other people sell and I'm like, wow, we literally kill ourselves. Like we do so much work. We do so much work.
You are doing a lot of work, but it's also giving a lot of value. And I know you've talked about this in other places. I've heard you talk about like wanting pricing to be accessible and especially because you have a global audience, like wanting it to be accessible based on where people are. So I totally understand why things are priced the way they are. For the retreats, though, you know this. That's
yes.
probably where your higher ticket offer is, because there's so much that goes into planning, and obviously travel and all of that can be higher price. So how are those priced? Is it based on location, or do you stick it within a specific range?
Great question. And I had the chance of hiring like a third party agent, and I saw the plans and I was like, no, I don't want to do this with you, because I know that I need soul to be in every step of the process. Like you said, before we were even recording, if I'm going to invite someone and ask them to fly abroad for the very first time, sometimes people are flying abroad by themselves and they only have 14 days of holiday and they're choosing 6 to be with me, every step is going to be a value of meaning. I care about you. You matter. So because of that, I then go on scout visits. I meet the hosts. I speak to them in their language. Right now, the Italian retreat that's coming up, it's fully booked. It's in October. I'm planning the entire thing in Italian. I went to visit the family. I had dinner, the giant table, like brushing up on my rusty Italian. And with the language, I actually unlock this level of hominess that my retreaters get to feel. All of this to say that like the locations vary. When I first started doing it, I think I charged like $800 for 6 days. I know, because I was trialing the thing. Alexis, give me that look. I know. I always am like imposter syndrome, so I totally understand myself.
I? Where was I? I needed to be there.
I know. It was for Jo Club members only, so that was the caveat.
Okay.
So it was like, hey guys, I'm putting together this experience. Please come and let me know how it is. And everybody that came had this like crazy life-changing experience. We were sobbing our eyes out. It was amazing. I was like, can I replicate this? And then the next year I did it again in Croatia. I made it a little bit more expensive. I think I made it like 1,200, nothing crazy. Booked it out, not even an issue. Had the same magic with a different twist, because everybody is different. They bring a different energy. But it was like, the more I raised the prices, actually, the more intentional the groups got. And it makes sense, because if you're investing 1,200, it's not the same as 800. 800, you could party the whole week and you're fine. 1,200, suddenly I'm going to do this chart and I'm going to think about what this means, you know?
Yeah.
The next year we did Mexico. So we started increasing the prices, because every time I did them, people would say like, this is a giant experience. This is so much more valuable than what you're pricing it at. And so, but I was doing it because I loved it, Alexis. Like I can't not do it. I love taking care of people.
Of course.
Today, we did, this is going to be my third, technically fourth retreat. I did one for the facilitator team in Amsterdam, so that one doesn't technically count. But I did coordinate a whole retreat for them, which was lovely because they met in person.
I love that.
But I did 2 retreats in Greece, and the first one was 2,500 for like the transformative, the iconic, like you're there for journey of transformation. And then I did my first career and calling retreat, which I believe started at 3,500, because that was a business retreat where you're leaving with a business strategy, you're leaving with like tangible things that can make you money. And then the Italy one will be 2,500 again. So I'm pricing them based on the themes of what you get. Yeah. And like the amount of lecturing, like if I'm literally giving you a business lecture, it's going to be worth,
oh, of course,
more than, but I don't know though, because they're so good. Then I give people surveys at the end of the retreat, and I just checked the surveys from Career and Calling, and people were like, this should be a $5,000 experience.
Definitely. Well, think about whenever you're investing in coaching, you know, coaching can be anywhere from $2,000, $5,000, $10,000. And if you are getting like a hyper-focused one-on-one experience with you building something, this is my business coach coming in, you could absolutely charge $5,000, but it's all about finding pricing for you that feels good selling it. And I think that's a big thing with intuitive selling, is finding pricing that matches the value, but also you feel it, like from an integral perspective, you feel good like asking for that, and you feel like, okay, I'm going to deliver. And so that's always, I think, a personal journey.
It's true. Yeah. And I think that makes sense for, especially if you're starting something new, to price it a little lower to get case studies. And that's why the first retreat was like dirt cheap, because I was like, can I even pull this off? Who am I to be here selling a 5K experience when I've never done this before? Things could go terribly wrong, or I could hate it. Like, I don't know how this is going to be.
Yeah.
So I am proud of the retreat business because it's been slowly growing. And every time I charge more, I can genuinely say like, the experiences get better, the locations get better, the communication before, during, and after gets better. Everything gets better.
Yeah.
So that's a business that I feel like I also am going to be scaling next year. And this is the next big challenge that I'll have, because right now I'm the one doing most of the logistics. And it's an exciting story. I don't know. I feel like in an ideal world, I want to give my facilitators the chance to be Jo Club retreat facilitators and run their own retreats and have it as an entrepreneurship opportunity for them to be like, oh, I'm going to be in Italy. Can I host a retreat? And then it's like, yeah, here's the playbook. Here's the percentage. Like, this is how I'll be there. These are the resources. Like, that I think is the next chapter, because what I found in doing these in-person experiences, people are thirsty, craving that in-person community. Online is amazing, but in person, there's just nothing like it. This is where lifelong bonds get sealed.
Yeah.
This is where you get that human affinity that you cannot potentially, like, you can't really foster. You can kind of get it online, but it's just so different.
It is. It's beautiful to see the evolution of your creative arc of, starting in video production, producing videos, and becoming who you are through like the 12 years of being a creator, but also being a businesswoman. And now you're at this stage where you're asking these questions about scaling, about not being the center of the spoke, so that you can continue to grow, you can continue to start different companies, write books. And when you are, as you mentioned, like the bottleneck, it is difficult to grow outside of maybe the level that you're at. And so it's amazing to hear over the last 4 years how you've noticed when you're bumping up against like your own, okay, I'm ready for the next level. I need help. I'm ready for the next level. Let's solve this problem. I'm ready for the next level. Let's ask these questions, and who can I bring up, along with me to grow? So truly, like, you're such an inspiration. Thank you so much for this conversation. And I have learned so much. I can't wait to hear what other people take away from this episode and from your story. Last question before we wrap. What is something right now that you are working on that you're really, really proud of? And you're like, wow, okay, this right here, feels like my life work.
I think all of it feels like my life work.
Yeah.
I think all of it feels like my life work. I think what I'm really proud of is that I can now confidently say that no matter how wild the ideas are, that I will show up, I will try it. Even if it fails, or even if it's not perfect, I will do it, because I honor that voice inside my head. If I have a gut feeling about something, I don't second guess it anymore.
Yeah.
If I hire someone that I'm like, this might not actually be a good fit, I don't wait 6 months and torture myself. It's like, I'm proud of the fact that I've been through so many annoying and terrible and tough times to finally listen to the gut that has always guided me. It's the quietest voice in there. It really is. But it's like this confidence that you'll be okay, even if it's scary. Even if it's scary. In Jo Club, we have a saying, do it scared, because every single thing that I have done in my life, that you have done in your life, that anybody who's accomplished anything that is worth accomplishing has done, they're still freaking scared, but they do it anyways.
Yeah.
So send that email, shoot that video, make that phone call, take that trip, like literally do it scared. Keep yourself safe, but you can do it. Like, you could be so much greater if, and not even be greater, but just like be who you've been destined to be if we just stop standing in our own way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. The world is better because Joe Franco is in it. I'm so thankful for you in this conversation. Where can people stay connected with you? Join Jo Club, maybe even attend your next retreat. I think I see that on my 2025 bingo card. Like, I want to go to a retreat.
I'm going to actually send you an email about this, because the Greece retreat is on another level. Pack your bags.
Let's
We're going
do
to
it.
Naxos.
I'm ready.
So you can follow all of my crazy things at JO_Franco on Instagram and Threads. And I have a newsletter too that you could sign up to, Jo's Journal, which has been like a really fun creative outlet. And then all things Jo Club live on www.joclub.world. And that's JOCLUB, which stands for the Journal Club, but also makes sense with my name.
I love it. I'll have all of that linked up in the show notes. Jo, thank you so much for your time and everything that you bring to the world. So thankful for you.
Thank you, Alexis.
Hey there, it's your host, Alexis Teichmiller. And wow, Jo's story is one of resilience, curiosity, and courage. What a fantastic discussion with Jo. If it resonated with you, I would love for you to drop a comment or leave a review because we love hearing what you are experiencing and taking away from the Making of podcast. Okay, so we've interviewed a real person from Jo's community, Jo Club. Her name is Aurora Lucas. Aurora is an educator and advocate for marginalized communities with a passion for healthcare equity shaped by her own journey as an immigrant. Diagnosed with lung cancer at 28 while pursuing her doctorate and teaching full-time, she faced a 3-month delay in diagnosis due to her age and insurance issues. This experience fueled her commitment to addressing disparities in healthcare access, particularly for the lung cancer community. Aurora joined Jo Club in the middle of her battle with lung cancer, and it changed her life. She found healing through journaling and started pursuing her dream of becoming a public speaker. This is a deeply inspiring story of rediscovering your dreams after navigating life-altering traumatic experiences. With that, let's hear from Aurora. Hello, Aurora Lucas. Welcome to the Making of. So excited to have you here and hear about your experience with Jo Franco and being a part of Jo Club. So let's run it back to the very beginning. Take me back to when you first discovered Jo and where were you in life at that point in time?
Yeah, in life, that's a really good question. Thank you, Alexis. And when I look back, I don't know what year it was, but I remember being on YouTube and she had this video. It was called My Immigration Story. So I clicked it and I was like, okay, like, what is this? And then I was like mind blown because she was talking about like being an in-betweener and just like her story from being undocumented to then traveling the world. And at that point in time, I had dreams of becoming a diplomat. And so I knew her Netflix show was coming out. So then I was like, oh my God, like she has this other content, and I think I was just kind of watching her go after her dreams. And I was still, I was teaching and getting like my licensure, getting my adulthood life so like together. But I was very like exhausted. And I remember I also come from an immigrant background, and I think she was like an inspiration, but I would like, to see her on the screen. And when I was 28, I was actually diagnosed with lung cancer. That was a huge like waking up moment for me. And I think healing from that, I was like, okay, I should journal because it was at a time that I lost my voice. And then I was Googling like journaling clubs and whatnot. And then her Jo Club showed up, but I wasn't making the connection yet. I was like, okay, like, let me try and sign up. And then I made the connection when I started talking like back and forth about the membership. I was like, oh my God, this is the same girl. Like I used to watch. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I was like, oh, okay. And yeah, her and, her manager, Talene, her Jo Club manager, Talene, were really just like friendly. And I was like, okay, maybe I should join. And then it was her product that was like the 21-day challenge.
Mm-hmm.
That changed my life because I was trying to be a diplomat and then all the health stuff came through and I was like, oh my God, my dreams are over. I could even ask my doctors. I would be like in the appointments. I was like, can I still travel with all this health stuff? Because I know wanting to be a diplomat, you have to be in good health.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember like even texting my best friend who's already a diplomat. I was like, maybe this can't happen anymore. So I think I was at that point in my life where I was like, things just really have to change. And then I was doing the 21-day challenge. And the idea that Jo had placed in my mind was she would ask questions like, what made you happy as a child? And then I started thinking about that. And then I think it was just like the challenge in my mind of being able to create my own career. Cause there is an activity where you had to like create your own job descriptions for like your future dream. And I was like, never done this before. Because like, you know, wanting to be a teacher or preparing for certain careers, you're molding yourself for those careers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. What a beautiful
Yeah.
story. I'm so sorry about your experience with cancer. Are you in remission now?
Yeah, I am. I'm gonna be like a survivor for 3 years now.
Wow.
But I'm still, since that 21-day challenge, I'm on like day 545 of continuously journaling.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
incredible. Well, congratulations on being in remission and
Thank
really
you.
leaning on journaling and reflection and to process such a traumatic experience. What about the digging into like what was possible for your career? What
Yeah.
about that shifted for you? So you kind of went through this period of what's possible? What does my path work like now that I'm walking through these very real, very hard experiences in life? What came out of that, I guess? What shifted for you based on some of that reflection on what was next?
Yeah, if we like reflected on life pre-diagnosis, I think that I had dreams, but then, you know, like COVID and then the housing market, everything became about paying bills and trying to survive. And I think with journaling and then joining Jo Club and that 21-day challenge, it's like it gave me permission to kind of say those dreams again. Cause I think during undergrad, I was like in that Delulu mode I was like, I want to be a public speaker and I want to do all this. And then comes adulthood. It's like, oh my God, you're in like so much like debt and you have so many bills. But I was like, you know what? During that dark time, I was like, we really only have one life to live. And then I think I had found Jo Club, even though it had already existed for 2 years. I was like, oh, it came up at the right time.
Wow. That's beautiful. Into the realities of life mixed with the room and permission, as you said, to dream again. So let's take a step to where you are now. You've been in Jo Club for a minute now. I know that you also attended one of Jo's in-person retreats in Greece. Tell me about that experience and how that shifted maybe where you are today.
Yeah. One of the more like awakening parts was wanting to be a public speaker and then being surrounded by facilitators who would say like, yeah, why not? Like, go for it. And then for me, it was like such an impossible dream because I'm not connected to any public speakers, but I knew that it was my dream. But ever since then, you could see the trajectory of like my public speaking career, which is still like a work in progress. But this year I've done, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 events now where I think the biggest crowd I've spoken to was around 700 this past May.
Wow, Aurora, that's incredible.
Yeah. And I went to the retreat because I was like, I want to keep this going. I'm still like in the phase of like being in between, you know, teacher mode and then still trying to get this thing going full time. But you could see my vision board here. It was like, what, like one day I want my life to be. This is actually from the retreat.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. And it's still, I think, a work in progress, but I very much now am connected to people who know about that dream and are still connected to it. Yeah. Because there's like companies. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. I was just like, oh, the other thing is too, because she had the language challenge. A big challenge for me was, I was like, how do you go in front of the camera and you're just authentic and funny? Because I don't know how she did that, but she was like, jump in front of the camera and like one of her challenges, in front of the camera and speak a totally different language. And then I started trying that. And then I actually became comfortable with the camera. And now I like advocate for lung cancer on TikTok. That's another thing.
Oh,
yeah. Incredible. And I think just somebody believing in you and having that whole community as well. Because there's Jo, but there's also her facilitators are also incredible.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
something about being in community with people who know it's possible. Like,
Yeah.
there's you overcoming your own mindset blocks of, can I do this? Is this possible? But then when you, and I'm glad you mentioned this, when you speak your dreams out to people
Yeah.
and you actually tell them, you make room for them, you give them, you breathe life into them. And then you also have a community there that's listening and encouraging and saying, why not? Why not you? Like, what would that look like? What progress do you want to make on it? And like, just that encouragement goes so far, because as you mentioned, we've talked about this a little bit, when you get farther into adulthood, you kind of get on these like specific paths. And it's really important to be around people who give you room to be disruptive, quote unquote, to whatever path. And so gotten to really find, your way, and you're still finding it. But being in community with people that are there to sit with you in the unknown and to support you through that is really, really beautiful.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it makes the biggest difference. And like one of my biggest fears, which I'm so thankful I spoke it out loud during like a session. I was like, I don't want to be one of those public speakers that burn out and like just get up on stage, that speak, but they don't have much depth. You know what I mean? I was like, I always want to be that person that's like emotionally intelligent. And I think that journaling and in community gives you that sustainability.
Yeah. That's an important factor. It is a muscle to keep flexing, because that awareness of, am I just showing up to perform, or am I showing up and my whole heart is in it? There's a huge, like, we access different parts of ourself when we tap into that. And it's really cool to see you talk through that. So if you could say one thing to Jo and the impact that she's had on your life, what would it be?
I like the way that you use the word heart. So I would tell Jo, like, thank you for sharing your heart and your dreams to the world. Even though I know sometimes it's gotten dark, she still came back and is still making this difference for others. And I see her uplifting others, because people from the community, I still see like the trajectory of their lives, and I'm so excited for them. So just like, thank you for sharing your heart and like soul and your dreams with the world.
Thank you so much for your time. And I am rooting for you. I'm in your corner, and I can't wait to see
Thank you.
where you continue to grow and impact people with your story as well. It's so important. And yeah, I just can't wait to see all of your dreams continue to take shape.
Thank you, Alexis.